Secunda Kamani there. So, to the issue of preventing people seemingly succumbing to the temptations of an extreme or even violent cult. The government has a strategy. It's called the Prevent Strategy, and the departures to Syria have raised new questions, obvious questions, about how effective it is. Joining me now from Birmingham is Zubeda Limbada, the founder of ConnectJustice, a group which works with the Prevent Strategy. Here with me in the studio is Fayaz Mughal, founder of Faith Matters and a former government advisor on extremism, and also by Raza Nadeem, a member of the Muslim Public Affairs Committee, a group which says it helps empower Muslims taking part in their Islamic duty of non-violent jihad. I'd like to start. I'd like to leave Raza for a minute. I'm going to focus on the other two, and then I'm going to bring you in. Zubeda, in Birmingham, just let us know whether you think Prevent is preventing the things it's meant to prevent.
It's a complicated question to a very complicated situation, because you can't answer yes, because we've had something called, as you mentioned, the Preventing Extremism Strategy, whereby the government has been spending roughly £40 million annually for precisely addressing this sort of problem. We've also got some of the toughest legislation in Europe in terms of both the Terrorism Act and the Counter-Terrorism Security Act, which places obligations in terms of hospitals, schools, etc., in terms of addressing terrorism problems as well. So that first question of are we doing enough, not just in Birmingham, but around the country in addressing the problem, has got obvious question marks raised against it, because it's around engagement, building trust with communities, between government and communities, around trust and confidence, so that people feel that this situation is not occurring and recurring time and time again when 700 of British citizens are going to fight alongside groups like ISIS in Syria.
Now, that's a very long way of saying
it is.
You don't really know whether it's working. We're spending lots of money on it, and we were spending a lot more than 40 million a year on it at one point. We were spending hundreds of millions on it, and we don't really know whether it's working.
It's not about whether it's working or not. It's about kind of, it's not, you can't have a top-down approach in addressing the situation. One of the things that we advocate very strongly is where are the spaces that we're going to have some of these uncomfortable conversations with communities, primarily around identity, and addressing some of those aspects around identity for young people, where they can articulate issues around belonging, where women feel that they have a space to articulate some of their concerns, not just being, not just having some of their conversations safeguarded through men when addressing authority, but having some of those spaces around being family members and having solutions addressed as well.
Right. Fayaz, is Prevent working in your view? Have you got a clearer answer, yes or no? I know it's a complicated...
I think yes, it's working in terms of reducing some of the threats that we have, whether those threats are online or offline. And I guess around the community engagement element, it's not working so well. And that's because of perception within some sections of Muslim communities. Now, the reality is we're in a different ball game here. This is a multivariate problem. It affects us because of the online world. It affects us because of sense of exclusion. It affects us because of ideas that are being promoted. It affects us because of mentors involved. So there needs to be multivariate solutions. Now, the government is trying in some way to meet some of those issues. However, there is a growing lack of trust between the very communities that Prevent should be bringing on board.
One of the things I'm wondering is whether the government has attempted to use Prevent to some extent to promote British values. For example, by saying we don't want to be doing business with Muslim groups who are deeply religious, not jihadists, but deeply religious. We don't want to deal with them because they don't, in a sense, represent British values. Has that, if you like, reduced the trust or the effectiveness of this as a scheme in preventing radicalisation?
I think around integration and Prevent there has been a convergence, and I think that's been problematic. I think these are two distinct, to some degree, distinctly different areas. So the answer is this sense of convergence has caused some...
Convergence between what?
Between integration, the agenda of integration, and prevent. There has been a convergence, and that has been problematic.
Because it reduces the trust in the people you're trying to get at.
Because it reduces the trust. And that needs to be disentangled quickly. Now, there are some points where there are convergences, but what we've been hearing is a lot of the discussions have fused the two, and that's problematic. Look, there'll be groups out there some people don't want to talk to, but the reality is sometimes you need to talk to those groups to not only get your point of view over, but also to listen.
I agree with that point in terms of you cannot say who you will and who you won't engage with, because if we are addressing the issue of groups like IS who have a very coherent strategy online in terms of what it's about, it almost sometimes seems that we haven't really got a very clear and articulate standpoint in terms of being intolerant of what we are tolerant about. So let me explain that in terms of we haven't got across to some of our young people, those people primarily attracted to the IS message, that this is a country where we can practice our faith or no faith. We have the ability and that freedom to practice that. And so therefore reducing that attractiveness, and when we reduce that trust and confidence, what we are doing is saying we don't like this group and we like this group. And so those people then see a them and us situation created.
Got it. Let me bring Raza in at this point, because Raza, we've had quite a nuanced discussion about what works or what might work in Prevent, what the role of government can be.
I'll be blunter.
Go on.
Well, when you ask, is Prevent working or is it not? Very simply, no, it's not. It's actually failed spectacularly. And if you look at the different iterations of Prevent, it's actually become much more draconian along the way and led to many more Muslims feeling a lot more demonised and alienated.
And why?
Well, it's very simple, because first you have to look at the underlying idea that it underpins Prevent, and that is, it's to do with Islamic ideology. That is the basis which leads to radicalisation. Now,
is that true? It's not about Islamic ideology, it's about a certain branch of Islamism which leads to a more extreme...
Well, what it's saying is it's a twisted version of Islam, but the thing is that idea, which has underpinned our Prevent strategy in this country since Tony Blair's time, it's failed, and it's been academically ridiculed because it has no basis in academia. You have Professor David Mills from University of Bath and others who say this is rubbish, but yet our government use it as a basis for trying to talk to Muslims, and Muslims aren't talking.
But then that doesn't really answer the question of what is the alternative.
Well, no, hang on.
So therefore...
Well, if you ask me, I'll tell you what the alternative is.
OK, let's hear your alternative, Raza, very briefly.
Yeah. OK, well, the alternative is this. Rather than talking at Muslims and saying this is the problem and you need to deal with it and it's to do with ideology and we'll take it from there, take a much more balanced approach and actually look at what is being said within academic circles and what Muslims themselves are saying on social media. And that is, this boils down to foreign policy and a feeling of alienation. That is the majority of the cases, and the fact that that doesn't factor in. No, not some, most.
No, well,
I think it's much more complex than foreign policy. And here we go.
Empirical evidence says otherwise.
I have been working, and I've been listening to a family who have done everything they can for their young son who was killed in Syria. They did everything. They were good parents. They mentored and supported him. This person did not have an inclination around foreign policy. There are cases of people...
How do you know that?
Because I've spoken to the parents and I've spoken to...
So they saw what he saw when he was on social media, did they?
It is not
when he saw the pictures of Israel bombing Palestine.
Sorry, Raza.
It's not about foreign policy as a whole. What this is about complex issues. It's about vulnerability. It's about the internet. It's about young people. It's about sense of identity. It's about ideology. It may be, and it is, foreign policy in there. But the reality is there are multiple points which actually lead people. There are multiple points that lead people towards moving down the line.
That is a balanced thing, but we don't see that in the conversations that lead to Prevent strategy being devised. Right. And that's part of the issue. If what Faiza said, if that is the line the government took, and when Theresa May speaks about these issues, you'll find Muslims saying that, yeah, well, actually, let's now have a discussion.
Zubeda, it's very clear that there's a debate within the Muslim communities, about what is right. Is central British government ever going to be a helpful participant in the debate we've just heard you all engaging in?
I think this is the central crux of it, which is we all need to have a part to play by polarising it in terms of just foreign policy, by polarising it in terms of just saying that the Prevent strategy isn't working is not constructive to the here and now situation.
We're going to leave it there,
where we need to address it.
Thank you all very much indeed.